Welcome back. This is session 2 for College of Marriage, and this week we are going to talk about how to love. My name is Scott Wood. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm going to be the facilitator for this session. For next week, Carolyn Klusmeyer will be back with week 3. So the first thing we want to do is we need to debrief the homework from last week. So for those of you who have done it, after I give these instructions, you might want to pause me for just a moment and take a minute to share with your partner. So the things we want to talk about is what things did you each notice that you wanted to have continue to happen or to happen more in your relationship? And then also, what changes did you notice if either of you tried out the kindness challenge for last week? So take a moment, pause me, and talk to your partner, and then let's resume. So this week, we want to talk about how to love, and we want to define love. So when you think about it, how do you define love? And if love is just a feeling, does that mean that it comes and goes? Is it possible that I could love you and not like you very much? Are those two things capable of existing together? So in English, love is kind of a squishy word. Sometimes we mean it as a noun, something we have, something we fall in and out of, something we feel. And sometimes we use it as a verb, that I love you. Now, your New Testament wasn't written in English originally. It was written in Greek. And in Greek, there are a number of different words for love. So there is eros, and eros is erotic love. This is about sexual desire. There is phileo, and phileo is about brotherly love. We get the name of the city of Philadelphia from that. It's the city of brotherly love. It's about fellowship. There is storge, which is about family love and loyalty, which actually does not appear in the New Testament. But the most common word for love that appears in the New Testament is the word agape. And agape is about an unmerited, unconditional, self-sacrificing love. It is giving love in action on behalf of the person that we're loving. So there's this story in John chapter 21. Now, where Jesus is having a conversation with Peter and reinstating Peter. And this is after the resurrection. Now, at the Last Supper, Peter had told Jesus, I am willing to follow you even to death. If every one of these other guys deserts you, I never will. And then a few hours later, 3 times he denies that he even knows Jesus. So they're having this conversation after the resurrection, and Jesus turns to Peter and he says, do you love me? And Peter says, yes, I love you. And Jesus said, feed my lambs. Then Jesus asks him again, do you love me? Peter says, you know that I love you. And Jesus says, feed my sheep. And then a 3rd time, Jesus says, Peter, do you love me? And Peter says, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. He says, well, take care of my sheep. So in English, that word love sounds like it's the same every time. But in the Greek, it actually isn't. The first 2 times Jesus asks the question, he says, Peter, do you agape me? Do you love me unconditionally? Can you do self-sacrificing love to me? And Peter's answer is, Lord, you know I phileo you. I love you like a brother. But at this point, I'm not capable of claiming that I can agape you. So the 3rd time Jesus asks, he goes, okay, Peter, do you phileo me? And Peter says, you know all things. You know that I do. So after denying his Lord, Peter is no longer the same guy who was claiming that he would be true no matter what, was no longer willing to claim that he could agape his Lord. He's saying the best I've got right now is phileo. And Jesus says, okay, we'll work from there. Now, when the New Testament talks about love between husbands and wives, though, the word is agape. So this unconditional self-sacrificing love is the target we're shooting for. Now, if Peter couldn't do it with Jesus, you won't do it perfectly with your mate. But we still want to shoot at that target. There are a couple of Paul's letters where he gives instructions to husbands and wives. You'll find this in Ephesians chapter 5, and you'll find it in Colossians chapter 3. And for modern Western readers, we sometimes bristle at Paul's commandment that wives need to submit to their husbands. However, if you listen to that in context, given the culture he was writing to, that was neither a new nor a particularly radical idea. The idea that follows that husbands needed to love their wives, husbands needed to agape their wives, was a radical idea. And not only that, but husbands were commanded to love their wives the way that Christ loved the church. Now that is a very tall order. Then 1 Peter, in Peter's letter, in chapter 3, he suggests that how husbands love their wives actually impacts their spiritual status. So he tells husbands to live with respect to their wives and treat them with kindness so that nothing will hinder your prayers. So in Christendom, there are really two primary views about the role between husbands and wives and how they relate. The older, more conservative one is called complementarian, and essentially asserts that husbands and wives have different roles, and that those roles are defined and God-given, and they apply to all cultures and all times, and that ultimately the husband is in charge. The second view is the egalitarian view. And the egalitarian view says husbands and wives are equal, that there aren't defined roles that are God-given, but the places in Scripture where it says the husband has one role and the wife has another, that is steeped in the cultural context for which it was written, rather than divine truth that is expected to be followed for all generations and all times. So sometimes a husband will come into therapy with a complementarian view, and his complaint will be, my wife does not submit to me. Now, gentlemen, if you're going to play that card, if this is your view, what I would first suggest is you need to look at how well do you agape her? Do you love her unconditionally as Christ loved the church? Do you love her self-sacrificially? If you do and you both have this view, then there may be something to talk about. The more common view for Western culture now is the egalitarian view. So ladies, you don't get off the hook quite this easy, because if you're going with an egalitarian view, then agape works both ways. How well are you agapeing your husband? How well are you showing him unconditional love, self-sacrificing love? How well are you building him up? So for both husbands and wives, agape love should be the hallmark of that marriage. And you are only responsible for you. You're not responsible for how your partner is loving you, but how you love your partner. So this is the point for those attending the class where we're going to have a group discussion about what we just talked about. So if you're watching this at home with your partner, this might be a good point for you to pause me and have a conversation together about this. So as you're hearing this, what does it mean for you? What do you believe God's intent was for marriage? And how do you see this happening in your own marriage? For those of you who attended the first week, in the classroom the subject of love languages came up, and we're going to talk about that now. About 25 years ago, Dr. Gary Chapman wrote a book called The 5 Love Languages, and his assertion was there are different ways in which we express love to our partner, in which we feel loved when it's expressed to us. And that for most of us, we have one or two that are our primary language. They're our native tongue, and that we speak naturally. And so those love languages are physical touch and closeness, that's just touch and proximity. Words of encouragement, the affirming things we say to each other. Acts of service, the things that we do for each other as expressions of love. Gift giving, selecting and giving gifts as an expression of love. And quality time. Quality time is having meaningful conversations together. Now this all is well and good as long as you and your mate speak the same love language. So when we first get into a relationship, We tend to speak all 5 love languages pretty unilaterally. But as we settle into that relationship over time, we tend to default into our 1 or 2 that are our main love language that we speak naturally. That works fine as long as you and your mate speak the same love language, but if we have different love languages, you may be trying to say, I love you to your mate, but you may be missing each other. For example, if the husband's love language is acts of service and the wife's love language is quality time, the husband may be saying, I love you by buzzing around the house making repairs on things, and the wife may be feeling not loved because he's not there sitting down having quality time with her. So being able to recognize your own love languages and those of your partners helps us connect better in this close relationship. So at this point, there is a couple exercises that I would have you do. And with that, you'll see 2 columns with the love languages listed there. And I'd ask you to rank your own love languages from 1 to 5, with 1 being your primary love language, and then also take a shot at ranking your partner's love languages from 1 to 5, based on what you know from living with your partner for these years. And then once you've done that, take some time to compare those 2 together and have some discussions about how you see that playing out in your own marriage. So this would be another good point at which to pause and to talk together. So in this next section, I want to talk about self-talk. And when I say self-talk, I mean the way that you talk to yourself about your partner. And I think this is a very important area because it impacts how you perceive your partner. Because I happen to know that your mate is strange in ways that you never could have imagined before the 2 of you got married. And the reason I know this is because everybody is, which means that you are too. So you have a choice. You're faced with a choice. You can either focus on those things about your partner that you love, that were the reason that you selected this person to be your mate, or you can focus on those little annoyances. So my assertion, my suggestion to you here would be, it's really important that when you talk to yourself about your partner, that you're reminding yourself of all the things that you love about this person. In this last section, I want to talk about empathy. And empathy, I think, is one of the greatest forces for good in human relationships. This could solve a lot of our societal problems, not to mention our marital problems, and all of our relationship problems if we get this piece right. So for empathy to be effective, I would assert it requires 3 components. The first is, I get what it's like to be you. The second is, I care what it's like to be you. And the third is that you have a real sense that those first 2 are true. That I do get what it's like to be you, and I do care what it's like to be you. Because if I get it and I care, but you don't feel that, we missed each other. If your partner says something to you when you 2 are having a discussion, and it sounds like it makes no sense at all, like it sounds like what your partner just said, sounds like 2 + 2 is 7, here's the thing. Your partner's not dumb. After all, look who he or she chose for a mate. So, if what you say to me sounds like 2 + 2 is 7, I want to approach with genuine curiosity and find out how you got there. I want to understand what it's like to be you. And not only that, once I understand how you got there, I want to know what it feels like for you to be there. What's it feel like for that to be your reality? I would assert to you that it will always make sense how your partner responds to you. If something isn't making sense, you want to understand that and take the time to understand that. And this is going to be the heart of empathy. I need to get what it's like to be you, and I need to care what it's like to be you. And you need to feel that those are both true. Before we leave this topic, I want to talk a little bit about systems theory. And the idea here is that marriages are actually systems, and systems try to maintain homeostasis. So the first time you try to do something different, expect that it's not going to land quite as well as you hoped. The system's going to try and push you back into place and avoid change. So it's going to take some perseverance to do this. So I want to give you a tool that you can use the first time you try to express empathy for your partner and he or she doesn't quite get it. You can blame me. You can say, I was trying to do what Scott suggested I do, and then you can ask, how could I have done that better? Hopefully, this will disrupt the normal cycle you would get into and elicit from your partner a response about how you could have done that better and help the two of you move forward in being able to express empathy to each other. So this brings us around to the homework. So the homework for this week, I have just a couple of things for you. One, if you started the kindness challenge last week, I'd encourage you to continue the kindness challenge. If you weren't in class last week and have not started it, you can look up the kindness challenge. It's pretty basic. It is 3 components. It is say nothing negative to or about your mate, say something affirming to your mate every day, and every day do some small act of kindness for your mate. You can look on the website from Shanti Feldhan, and you can sign up for the kindness challenge as well, and she will send you a daily email with suggestions on how you can implement this. The other piece I would like you to have this week is have a conversation about empathy, about how well am I doing? How much do you feel like I get you? How much do you feel like I care? And how can I do that better? So that's going to wrap us up for this week. I hope you have a wonderful week, and next week Carolyn will be presenting on family of origin. See you then.